The silence of folded space was not truly silent. To Princess Lyris, standing alone on the command bridge of the Vigilant Crown, it sounded like singing. It was a high, resonant hum that vibrated through the diamond glass floor and up into the soles of her boots. A constant reminder that the massive flagship was slicing through the fabric of reality itself. Outside the panoramic viewing walls, the universe was a blur of indigo and violet streaks. Starlight stretched thin by hypervelocity. Lyris adjusted the high collar of her dress uniform. The fabric was stiff, woven from ballistic silk and threads of platinum, designed to look regal but function as armor. It felt heavy today, heavier than usual. This was the first time she would wear it not for a parade or a coronation anniversary, but for war. She stared at her reflection in the dark, transparent aluminum of the viewport. At 22 cycles of age, she looked every bit the Imperial commander the propaganda reels promised. Her skin was pale and luminous, her eyes a sharp, arresting violet that marked her royal lineage, and her hair was pulled back in a severe, complex braid pinned with shards of memory crystal. But she saw the tremor in her hands, which she kept clasped tightly behind her back. "You are ready," she told herself. "You are the daughter of the Sun Kings. You are the spear point of civilization." But the silence of the bridge felt less like authority and more like isolation. The crew in the pits below her command dais worked with terrified efficiency, their fingers dancing over hard light interfaces, their voices hushed. They were afraid of the mission, yes, but they were also afraid of her. Or rather, they were afraid of failing her. She turned away from the stars and walked toward the tactical table in the center of the room. A holographic projection shimmered there, rotating slowly. It was a representation of the target system, currently just a set of abstract coordinates and gravity wells. Admiral Kalen stepped out of the shadows near the comm station. He was a towering figure, his skin gray and deeply lined, like chiseled granite. He had served her father and his father before him. "We are on schedule, Highness," Kalen said. His voice was like grinding stones. "We will breach the cloaking grid in 2 hours." Lyris nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "And the resistance estimates?" "Unchanged. The target world is primitive but aggressive. They hoard stolen technology they do not understand. Our scanners indicate high-yield kinetic weapons and unstable fission reactors. We must pacify them quickly before they burn themselves and this sector to ash." Pacify. It was a clean word. It smelled of antiseptic and order. It did not smell of blood. "Make sure the targeting arrays are calibrated for infrastructure," Lyris said, reciting the protocols she had memorized. "We want to disable their ability to wage war, not exterminate the population. We are not butchers." "Admiral," Kalen's eyes, black and unreadable, held hers for a beat too long. "Of course. Highness?" "Surgical precision, as the Council commanded." He bowed and retreated, but Lyris felt a cold prickle at the base of her neck. She had caught fragments of encrypted burst transmissions earlier that morning, communications that bypassed her station entirely. She had heard the High Counselors whispering in the corridors of the palace before the fleet launched, speaking of resource quotas and final solutions. There were rumors that the target world was not just a threat, but a gold mine, and that the Empire's economy, teetering on the brink of collapse, needed a war to survive. And there were darker whispers still, whispers that said Princess Lyris was too soft, too scholarly for the throne, and that a tragic accident during her first command might pave the way for a stronger successor. She shook the thoughts away. Paranoia was a weakness. She needed clarity. She needed to talk to the one person on this ship who wasn't paid to agree with her. Lyris left the bridge, her royal guards trailing her at a discreet distance. and descended into the secure levels of the vigilant crown. The air here was colder, recycled one too many times. She passed containment labs and armories until she reached the detention block. The cell was a cylinder of transparent aluminum suspended in the center of a gravity-nullified room. Inside, Aiden Cole floated cross-legged in midair, spinning a metal spoon between his fingers. He looked up as the blast doors hissed open. He was human, a species the Empire considered chaotic and dangerous. He had messy dark hair that defied gravity, sharp hazel eyes that always seemed to be laughing at a joke Lyris didn't understand, and a jawline covered in rough stubble. He wore a gray prisoner's jumpsuit that was slightly too small for his broad shoulders. Chains of coherent light bound his wrists and ankles, tethering him to the center of the cell, but he wore them like jewelry. "Princess," Aiden drawled. He didn't stand. He didn't bow. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Did you run out of planets to blow up? Or did you just miss my sparkling conversation?" Lyris dismissed her guards with a wave of her hand. They hesitated, then stepped back outside the blast doors. "I am not blowing up planets." "Aiden," Lyris said, stepping up to the control console. "I am bringing order to a chaotic region, and I came to check on my cultural consultant." Aiden laughed, a dry, sharp sound. "Cultural consultant, is that what we are calling it today? Last week I was a high-value intelligence asset. The week before that, I was the savage. You guys really need to pick a lane." He floated closer to the glass, his movement graceful despite the restraints. "We are dropping out of warp soon," Lyris said, ignoring his tone. "I wanted to review the linguistic protocols one last time. If we are forced to make contact with the indigenous leadership, I need to ensure there are no misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings," Aiden repeated. He pressed his hand against the barrier. "You mean like the misunderstanding where your fleet shows up in the sky and vaporizes their defense grid?" "Yeah, that is usually a sticky social situation. In my culture, we consider that a bit rude." Lyris felt her temper flare. It was a familiar dance. He pushed. She stiffened. He mocked. She recited protocol. "Your culture is fragmented and violent," she snapped. "We have analyzed your history. 3 global wars in 2 centuries. Atmospheric poisoning. You pointed nuclear weapons at your own cities for 50 years. Do not lecture me on rudeness. Aiden, we are coming to save this world from itself." Aiden's smile vanished. The playfulness dropped from his face, revealing a hard, weary look that made him seem much older than his 25 years. "Save it," he said softly. "Is that what they told you? It is the truth. It is a sales pitch." "Lyris." Aiden drifted until he was eye level with her. "Look at me. You have kept me in this fishbowl for 6 months. Have I tried to kill you? Have I acted like the monster your Admiral Kalen says I am?" "No," Lyris admitted quietly. "You have been annoyingly persistent in your sarcasm, but not violent. Because my people aren't monsters. We are messy. We are loud. We make mistakes. But we are not what you think we are. If you go down there with finger on the trigger, expecting beasts, you are going to create a slaughter, and it will be on your soul, not the Admiral's." Lyris looked away, studying the complex readouts on the console. She hated how he did that, how he cut through the layers of royal conditioning with a few simple words. He spoke to her not as a high commander, but as a person. It was terrifying. It was addictive. "I have my orders," she said, her voice sounding thin in the empty room. "And you have yours. You will assist with translation if we capture local leaders. That is the price of your survival." Aiden leaned back. floating upside down, the gravity in the cell shifting at his whim. You know, for a supreme galactic conqueror, you look terrified, he observed. I am not terrified. You are shaking. I am vibrating with the energy of the ship, she lied. Sure, tell yourself that. He spun the spoon again. Just remember, Highness, when the shooting starts, the history books are written by the winners. But the ghosts, they haunt everyone. Lyris turned on her heel, her cape swirling around her. Prepare yourself, Specialist Cole. We arrive in 1 hour. She stormed out, her heart pounding against her rib. She told herself it was anger. She refused to admit it was doubt. The transition from superluminal velocity to normal space was violent. The vigilant crown shuddered, the singing of the drive dying into a low, thrumming growl. Reality snapped back into place with a visual distortion that made the bridge crew groan and grab their consoles. Admiral Kalen stood at the center of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. Report, he barked. We have arrived at the coordinates. A navigation officer called out. Scanners are engaging. The planetary cloaking grid is active. It is a level 5 dispersion field, highly advanced. Lyris stood on her dais, watching the main screen. It showed nothing but empty starfield. The target world was hiding. Initiate the spectral lance, Lyris ordered. Cut through the interference. The ship hummed as the massive sensor array focused. On the screen, the darkness began to tear. Beams of coherent tachyon particles sliced through the artificial camouflage, peeling back the layers of deception like the skin of a fruit. The black void dissolved, and there it was. A collective gasp went through the bridge. It was breathtaking, a sphere of vibrant, aching sapphire swirled with clouds of pure white. Vast oceans reflected the light of the local yellow sun. Emerald continents sprawled across the hemispheres, capped by poles of blinding ice. It was a jewel hanging in the void, radiating life and fragility. Lyris felt the breath catch in her throat. She had seen thousands of worlds, balls of rock, gas giants, ice moons, but nothing like this. It pulsed with energy. Target confirmed, Kalen said, though even his voice held a trace of awe. Planetary defenses are detecting our presence. They are powering up. Bring the prisoner to the bridge, Lyris said suddenly. Kalen turned to her, his brow ridged. Highness? That is against protocol. I need him to identify the primary energy signatures. She lied, her voice sharp. If we are to strike surgically, I need to know what I am looking at. Bring him, now. Kalen signaled the guards. Minutes later, the lift doors opened, and Aiden Cole was shoved onto the bridge. He was still in his chains, flanked by 2 armored sentinels. He looked pale, his usual bravado gone. He kept his head down, staring at the floor, refusing to look at the screen. Look, Aiden, Lyris commanded, stepping down to meet him. Tell me what we are facing. Aiden swallowed hard. He lifted his head slowly. His eyes locked onto the main view screen. The moment he saw the planet, his entire body went rigid. The color drained from his face so completely that Lyris thought he might faint. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Identify the power grid. Aiden. Lyris pressed, pointing at the continents. Is that a weapon complex there? In the northern hemisphere? She pointed to a large landmass shaped like a jagged tooth. She had studied the archives of the target culture, memorizing the geography of the enemy. She knew the shapes of their continents from the intelligence briefings. Aiden didn't answer. He was shaking, a distinct violent tremor that rattled his chains. Lyris frowned. She stepped closer to the screen, squinting at the landmass. She recognized the outline. She had seen it in the restricted files, labeled Hostile Zone Alpha. But then her mind flashed to a different file, A file she had stolen from Aiden's personal data pad months ago. A collection of pictures he had hidden. Pictures of a place he called home. She looked at the continent. Then she looked at the pictures in her memory. The jagged coastline. The Great Lakes in the center. The peninsula jutting out to the southeast. It wasn't a military fortress. She turned to Aiden. He was staring at the screen with a look of pure, unadulterated devastation. Tears, hot and unashamed, were streaming down his face. Lyris felt the world tilt. The realization hit her like a physical blow to the stomach, knocking the wind out of her lungs. "Wait," she whispered. She looked back at the screen, the blue marble, the swirling clouds, the aggressive, primitive world they were here to burn. She spun around, her eyes wide, panic clawing at her throat. She pointed a trembling finger at the screen. "Wait!" she screamed, her voice cracking, shattering the disciplined silence of the bridge. "Which planet are we invading?" The crew froze. Admiral Kalen stiffened. "It is Target Primus, Highness," Kalen said slowly. "As per the mission parameters." "No!" Lyris yelled. She grabbed Aiden by the front of his jumpsuit, hauling him forward. "Aiden! Aiden, tell me! Tell me what that is!" Aiden's voice was a broken whisper, ragged with grief. "It is Earth," he choked out. Lyris froze. The word hung in the air, heavy and terrible. "It is Earth," Aiden repeated, his voice rising, cracking with fury and sorrow. "That is my home, Lyris. That is the Atlantic Ocean. That—" He pointed with a shaking hand to a cluster of lights on the night side of the planet. "That is New York. My sister lives there. My parents." He looked at her, and the betrayal in his eyes was worse than any weapon. "You said you were going to a strategic outpost," he whispered. "You said it was a military buffer zone. You brought me home to watch you burn it." Lyris released him, stumbling back. Her boots clicked on the diamond floor. "I did not know," she stammered. "I swear, I did not know." She looked at the planet again. Suddenly, it wasn't a target. It wasn't a set of coordinates. It was a place where people lived. It was the place Aiden had told her about during the long nights of his captivity, when he thought no one was listening. He had talked about the smell of rain on hot concrete. He had talked about the sound of waves crashing on a beach called Malibu. He had talked about coffee shops and traffic jams and the way the leaves turned gold in the autumn. She was staring at the autumn. She was staring at the rain. And she had brought a fleet of world killers to its doorstep. "Highness," Admiral Kalen's voice cut through the fog. "We have a firing solution on the primary energy grid. The weapon capacitors are at 90%. Belay that order," Lyris shouted. She spun to face the command pits. "Stand down. Do not fire." Kalen stepped forward, his massive bulk looming over her. "Highness, we have lost the element of surprise. If we hesitate, they will launch countermeasures. We must strike now." "I said stand down," Lyris commanded, drawing herself up to her full height. She channeled every ounce of royal authority she possessed. "The atmospheric readings are inconsistent. I am detecting anomalous ion interference. If we fire now, the beam could scatter and hit civilian population centers." Kalen's eyes narrowed. He looked at the readout. "I see no interference." "Highness, you are not looking closely enough." Lyris lied, her mind racing. The cloaking grid left residual static. "We need to recalibrate. Give me 1 hour." Kalen stared at her. The silence stretched, thin and dangerous. He looked at Aiden, who was weeping silently, and then back at Lyris. He knew. She could see it in his eyes. He knew that she was lying, and he knew why. 1 hour, Kalen said, his voice flat. "But the council is watching. Princess. They will not tolerate hesitation. Get out, Lyris hissed. Clear the bridge. I want a full diagnostic on the sensor array. Kalen hesitated, then signaled the crew. Reluctantly, the officers filed out, leaving the automated systems running. Kalen was the last to leave. He paused at the door, casting one final dark look at Aiden before the blast doors slid shut. Lyris and Aiden were alone. The only light came from the massive hologram of Earth, bathing the bridge in a soft, ghostly blue glow. Aiden sank to his knees, the chains clattering. He stayed there, head bowed, breathing in ragged hitches. Lyris stood frozen, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She felt sick. The lie she had been living, the noble crusade, the benevolent empire, was dissolving around her. She walked slowly toward him. Aiden, she whispered. Don't, he said. His voice was raw. Just don't. She knelt beside him, ignoring the stiffness of her uniform. She reached out a hand, hovering it near his shoulder, terrified to touch him. I thought it was a fortress world, she said, the words spilling out in a rush. The briefing. They showed me bunkers. They showed me factories. They never showed the cities. They never showed the oceans. Aiden looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, burning with a mix of hatred and agony that seared Lyris to the bone. It doesn't matter what you thought, he spat. You are here. You brought the vigilant crown. You are the one with your finger on the button. I stopped the countdown, she pleaded. For an hour, Aiden shouted, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. You bought us 60 minutes before the genocide starts. What happens then, Lyris? Are you going to tell your admiral that you can't shoot because the consultant has a sister in Brooklyn? He struggled to his feet, the anti-grav chains humming. He walked to the window, pressing his forehead against the glass. He looked so small against the backdrop of his own world. My sister's name is Mia, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. She teaches piano. She has a cat named Buster who is afraid of thunder. She lives in a brick building with a fire escape that rusts in the rain. Lyris squeezed her eyes shut. Every detail was a knife. Stop, she whispered. No. Aiden turned to face her. You need to hear this. If you are going to kill them, you need to know who they are. My father grows tomatoes in the backyard. He worries about his blood pressure. My mother sings when she cooks. Aiden. They are not coordinates, he yelled, stepping toward her. He was crying freely now. They are people. And I am standing here, watching you decide if they get to see the sunrise tomorrow. Lyris looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the fear beneath the anger. She saw the desperate love he held for that blue sphere. And for the first time in her life, she felt a crack in the armor of her duty. A sensation bloomed in her chest, painful and warm. It was guilt, yes, but it was something else too. It was a fierce, protective instinct. She stood up and closed the distance between them. She stopped inches from him. She could smell the recycled air on his skin, see the pulse hammering in his throat. I will not let them fire, she vowed. Her voice was trembling, but her eyes were steady. I promise you. Aiden, I will not let them burn your home. Aiden searched her face, looking for the lie. He looked for the Imperial commander, but he found only the girl who had asked him curious questions about Rain. The tension between them shifted. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was electric. A terrifying intimacy born of the fact that they were the only two people in the universe who understood the magnitude of this moment. Lyris raised her hand again. This time, she didn't stop. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and almost brushed the tear track on his cheek. She wanted to comfort him. She wanted to be forgiven. Aiden didn't pull away. He held his breath, his eyes locking onto hers. For a second, the war didn't exist. The fleet didn't exist. There was only the blue light of Earth and the heat radiating between them. A shrill alarm shattered the moment. Lyrus jerked back as the bridge lights flashed from blue to emergency crimson. The blast doors hissed open and Admiral Kalen stormed back in, flanked by 4 armed guards. "Highness!" Kalen roared. "We have a breach! What is happening?" Lyrus demanded. "The spell broken." She stepped in front of Aiden, shielding him instinctively. "Sabotage!" Kalen spat. "Someone has inserted a viral code into the primary weapon capacitors. The firing sequence has been locked out." He pointed a thick finger at Aiden. "We detected a transmission from his cell moments before he was brought to the bridge. He signaled them. He compromised the ship. That is impossible," Lyrus shouted. "He has been in chains. He has no access to the network. He is a specialist in their primitive tech," Kalen countered, advancing. "He found a way. And now our weapons are dead in the water while the enemy mobilizes." Guards grabbed Aiden, hauling him back. He didn't fight them. He looked at Lyrus, his eyes wide. "I didn't do it." "Lyrus," he said, urgency in his voice. "I swear to you, I didn't do it." "Take him to the brig," Kalen ordered. "And prepare the interrogation droids. I want to know how he did it, and who helped him." Kalen's gaze shifted to Lyrus. It was a heavy, accusing look. "We will also need to review the security logs, Highness, to see how a prisoner was allowed such latitude." The threat hung in the air, sharp as a blade. The sabotage hadn't come from Aiden. Lyrus knew that. The timing was too perfect. The Admiral needed a reason to remove the princess from command, and he needed a reason to bypass the surgical strike and move straight to total annihilation. He had created both. "Wait," Lyrus said, her voice steel. "He stays in my custody." "Highness, I said he stays with me," Lyrus barked. "If he is the key to the sabotage, then I need him close to undo it. If you harm him, you destroy our only chance of restoring the weapons quickly." She met Kalen's stare. It was a gamble, a dangerous one. She was openly protecting the enemy now. Kalen stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Very well. But know this, Princess. The Council is watching. If the weapons are not online in 6 hours, I will assume command, and I will not be as patient." He turned and marched to the tactical station, barking orders to the crew to switch to secondary batteries. Lyrus stood in the red wash of the emergency lights. She looked at Aiden. He was pale, bruised where the guards had grabbed him. "We are in trouble," Aiden whispered. Lyrus looked out at the blue planet, now framed by the red glare of the bridge. She felt the weight of the crown on her head, heavy and suffocating. "Yes," she said softly. "We are." She looked at the man she was supposed to conquer and the planet she was supposed to destroy. "Come with me," she said. "We have work to do." She grabbed his arm, firmly this time, skin against skin, and led him off the bridge. The eyes of the crew followed them, suspicious and cold. The invasion had begun, but the war had shifted. It was no longer the Empire against the Earth. It was the two of them against everyone. The strategic display table in the center of the War Council chamber glowed with a malevolent red light, casting long skeletal shadows across the faces of the assembled admirals. Princess Lyrus stood at the head of the table, her hands gripping the obsidian edges until her knuckles turned white. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and aggressive ambition. "We are wasting time." "Highness?" Admiral Kalen rumbled, his voice like grinding tectonic plates. "The sabotage to the primary array is a setback. Yes, but our kinetic batteries are fully operational. We do not need the energy lance to make a point." A hologram of the Pacific Ocean hovered above the table. A red target reticle pulsed over a mid-ocean ridge, dangerously close to several island chains. A demonstration strike, Counselor Vex added, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on Lyris. A single kinetic impactor, dropped from orbit, it will create a tsunami that washes away their coastal defenses. It sends a message of absolute dominance without requiring a full invasion force. Lyris looked at the simulation. The casualty estimate scrolled in the corner. 200,000 projected fatalities. Collateral damage. Acceptable losses. To them, it was math. To her, it was the erasure of 200,000 voices, memories, and heartbeats. I will not authorize a strike based on incomplete data, Lyris said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her knees. The sabotage proves we have intelligence gaps. If we fire blindly, we risk hitting hidden antimatter stockpiles that our scans have missed. You want a tsunami, Admiral? You might crack the crust and kill the biosphere. Is a dead rock what we came to conquer? The room went silent. The logic was sound, even if it was fabricated. The Empire wanted resources, not a graveyard. Kalen leaned forward, his massive bulk intruding into her personal space. You are stalling, Lyris. Do not think we do not see it. You have 24 hours to authorize the strike. After that, the Council assumes you are compromised. I am not compromised, Lyris snapped, straightening her spine. I am thorough, and to prove it, I am personally conducting the final reconnaissance. She turned on her heel and swept out of the chamber before they could see the sweat beading at her hairline. The interrogation room was stark white, a sharp contrast to the gloom of the bridge. Aiden sat at a metal table, his hands unchained for the moment, though a security field hummed in the doorway. He looked up as Lyris entered, locking the door behind her. So, Aiden said, leaning back, did you come to torture me, or just to ask me more questions about the deadly, terrifying ritual known as Happy Hour? Lyris did not smile. She paced the length of the small room, her mind racing. They want to drop a kinetic rod into your ocean, she said. Aiden went still. The playful mask vanished. When? Soon. Unless I give them a reason not to. She stopped pacing and turned to him. She pulled a data pad from her belt and slammed it onto the table. Tell me about the governments, Aiden. The real ones, not the military targets. I need to know how your world breaks. I need to know how it holds together. If I am to sell the idea of an occupation instead of annihilation, I need to sound like I know your people better than my admirals do. Aiden looked at the pad, then at her. He saw the desperation in her violet eyes. He reached out and tapped the screen. It is messy. Lyris, we don't have one leader. We have nearly 200 countries, and they spend half their time arguing over borders and the other half arguing over money. Explain money, Lyris commanded, a stylus hovering over the pad. The concept is archaic. You trade paper for survival? We trade value, Aiden corrected. Look, you have to understand the psychology. Humans are terrified of scarcity. We fight because we think there isn't enough. Enough land, enough oil, enough water, Lyris wrote quickly. Species driven by resource anxiety, fear-based aggression. And the chemical dependencies? She asked. The scans show high concentrations of caffeine and ethanol in the population. Are these combat stimulants? Aiden laughed. A short, barking sound. Coffee? No, Princess. Coffee isn't a combat drug. It is the only reason our civilization functions before 9 in the morning. If you take away the coffee, then yes, you will see a war. Lyris noted this down with total seriousness. Strategic target, caffeine supply lines. Disruption causes societal collapse. She looked up at him. She was trying so hard to be the cold, analytical commander, but the tilt of her head was pure curiosity. "Your world is fragile," she murmured. "You are constantly on the verge of destroying yourselves." "Yeah," Aiden said softly. "We are. But that is the thing. Lyris, we don't. We get right to the edge, and then someone pulls us back. We are stubborn. We fix things. You see a fractured world. I see a billion people trying to figure out how to share a lifeboat." Lyris looked at him. His eyes were warm, hazel and gold in the harsh light. He spoke of his chaotic, broken world with such fierce pride that it made her chest ache. She had grown up in a crystalline palace where everything was perfect, orderly, and cold. She realized with a jolt that she was jealous of his mess. "I need to see it," she decided. "What?" "I told the council I am leading a scouting mission to evaluate the resistance personally." Aiden stared at her. "You are insane. You can't just walk around down there. You glow. Lyris literally thought you have zero melanin and your eyes are purple. We have technology." She dismissed. "Morphic nanofiber suits. They can restructure facial geometry and pigmentation. I can look human." "And why would you take that risk?" "Because," Lyris said, leaning close to him, her voice dropping to a whisper, "if I am on the surface, they cannot fire the kinetic rod. They will not risk killing a princess of the blood. I am making myself a hostage, Aiden, to buy your world time." Aiden looked at her, stunned. He saw the tremble in her hands again, but this time, he realized it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. She was terrified, but she was doing it anyway. "You need a guide," he said. "Yes," she replied, "I do." The insertion was violent and beautiful. The stealth shuttle was a sliver of matte black geometry, invisible to radar and thermal scans. It dropped through the upper atmosphere like a stone, the hull heating up as it tore through the cloud layer. Inside, Lyris gripped the crash webbing. She was wearing the morphic suit now. It felt like a second skin, cool and shifting. She had programmed it based on Aiden's description of a typical human woman. Her skin was now a warm beige, her hair a dark, tumbling brown. Her eyes were still violet. The tech couldn't change the retina structure. But she wore a pair of tinted tactical glasses that Aiden called sunglasses. Aiden sat beside her, piloting the craft with his handcuffed hands. She had released one hand to let him fly, keeping the other tethered to the console. "Easy," Aiden muttered, fighting the stick. "Your atmospheric density is thicker than I remember." Through the viewport, the clouds parted. Lyris gasped. Beneath them lay a sprawling grid of light. It was night on this side of the continent. Millions of amber and white lights stretched out like a web of fallen stars, weaving around the black curves of rivers and the dark void of a massive harbor. "That is the city?" Lyris asked. "That is New York," Aiden said, a grin breaking through his tension. "Try not to look too impressed. The locals can smell tourists." He banked the shuttle, bringing them down toward a derelict industrial zone on the outskirts of the metropolis. The landing gear hissed as they touched down on cracked concrete, hidden behind a rusting warehouse. The ramp lowered. The air that rushed in smelled of salt, exhaust, and something rotting. But to Lyris, it smelled alive. "Remember the cover," Lyris said, checking her sidearm, which was concealed under a heavy human coat. "We are travelers. I am Lyra. You are Aiden. We are together." "Together," Aiden repeated, checking his own disguise. He was wearing a stolen leather jacket over his jumpsuit. "Try to look less like you are inspecting the troops and more like you are looking for a bathroom." They stepped out into the night. The city was overwhelming. even on the outskirts. The noise was a physical weight, sirens, distant traffic, the thrum of the subway beneath the grates. They moved through the shadows, heading toward the denser population centers where Aiden said the contact would be. Lyris walked with a stiff, military gait, her head swiveling to scan every rooftop for snipers. "Relax," Aiden hissed, grabbing her elbow. "You walk like a killer robot. Slouch a little." "I do not slouch," Lyris hissed back. "It is bad for the spine. You are supposed to be human. Humans have bad spines." He pulled her closer as a police cruiser rolled slowly past the intersection. Lyris stiffened, her hand drifting toward her weapon. "Don't," Aiden whispered. "Just walk." He slid his hand down her arm and interlaced his fingers with hers. Lyris flinched. The contact was shocking. Her species had lower body temperatures. His hand felt like a furnace against her palm. It sent a strange prickling heat shooting up her arm, making the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "What are you doing?" she whispered, trying to pull away. "Holding hands," Aiden muttered, gripping tighter. "Couples do it. It implies intimacy. If we are touching, people look at the relationship, not the face." Lyris looked down at their joined hands. His fingers were rough, calloused. Hers were smooth and cool. It felt alien. It felt grounding. She stopped fighting him and let her hand relax into his. The heat was distracting, but it anchored her in the chaos of the street. They reached a crowded avenue. Neon signs flashed in colors Lyris didn't have names for. Smells assaulted her senses: frying oil, sweet sugar, burning rubber. She stopped abruptly in front of a small shop with a glass window. Inside, people were drinking dark liquid from paper cups. "Is that the chemical dispensary?" she asked loudly. "The Starbucks?" "Shh," Aiden groaned, dragging her away as a passerby stared. "It is a coffee shop. And keep your voice down. You sound like a text-to-speech program." They ducked into a small diner to get off the street. A drone patrol was sweeping the grid above, its spotlight cutting through the smog. A waitress slammed 2 plastic menus onto their table. "What can I get you?" Lyris stared at the woman. She had prepared for this. She needed to blend in. "I will require 1 unit of your finest nutritional biomass," she said clearly, "and a heated vessel of the stimulant fluid." The waitress popped gum loudly. "Pancakes and coffee, got it." "And for him?" "He will have the same," Lyris said, proud of her efficiency. Aiden buried his face in his hands. When the bill came, Lyris pulled a stack of paper currency Aiden had synthesized on the ship. She looked at the number, $20. She placed $500 on the table. "Keep the surplus," she told the waitress, "for your loyalty to the establishment." The waitress's eyes bugged out. Aiden snatched the money back, leaving a 20 and a 5. "She is from out of town," Aiden told the waitress with a strained smile. "Way out of town. Like Canada?" He dragged Lyris out of the diner before the waitress could ask questions. "You are terrible at this," Aiden whispered as they hurried down the block. "I was generous," Lyris argued. "Did you see her face? She was pleased. You tipped her 400%. That is not generosity. That is suspicious behavior." Their argument was cut short as a hum filled the air. "A drone." "Not one of ours," Lyris said, checking her wrist scanner. "That is a hunter-killer model. Imperial spec." "They are tracking us?" Aiden asked, panic edging his voice. "They are tracking me," Lyris realized. Kalen must have put a tracer on the shuttle. They ducked into a narrow alleyway between 2 brick buildings. The drone hovered at the mouth of the alley, its red eyes scanning the darkness. "Back here," Lyris commanded. She pushed Aiden into a recessed doorway, deep in the shadows. The space was tiny. She pressed herself against him to shield his body with her own, activating the localized dampening field in her suit. They were chest to chest. There was nowhere to move. Lyris looked up. Aiden was looking down. His back was pressed against the rusting metal door. Her hands were flattened against the wall on either side of his head. The drone whirred closer, its scanner beam slicing through the gloom. "Don't move," Lyris breathed. Her lips were inches from his jaw. She could feel his heart hammering against her chest. She could feel the rise and fall of his breathing. The dampening field created a bubble of silence around them, cutting off the city noise. In the quiet, the sound of their proximity was deafening. He smelled of the leather jacket and the strange, rain-scented soap from the ship. It was a dizzying, earthy smell. The drone hovered for an eternity, then turned and buzzed away. Lyris let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She made to step back, but the alley was too narrow. She stayed there, pinned by gravity and something else. "You saved me," Aiden whispered. "You are my asset," Lyris said, her voice sounding breathless and unconvincing. "I need you to navigate." Aiden looked at her. The tinted glasses had slid down her nose, revealing her violet eyes. In the shadows, the disguise seemed to fade. She wasn't Lyra, the human tourist. She was the princess, and she was pressing her body against a prisoner. "You know," Aiden said, his voice husky, "when I first saw you on the ship, before I knew you were the commander, I thought I was hallucinating." Lyris blinked. "Why?" "Because you looked like something out of a dream. You were standing there with that hologram crown, looking at the stars like you wanted to eat them. You were terrifying, but you were mesmerizing. I couldn't look away." Lyris felt a flush rise up her neck that had nothing to do with the suit's heating elements. She had been called many things: Highness, Commander, Daughter of the Sun. She had been praised for her lineage and her intellect, but she had never been called mesmerizing by a man who was looking at her, not her rank. It was a violation of every protocol. It was treasonous. It was the most thrilling thing she had ever heard. "We should move," she said. But she didn't move. "Yeah," Aiden said. "We should." He didn't move either. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back up to her eyes. For a second, Lyris thought he might kiss her. The idea terrified her. She realized, with a shock of horror, that she wanted him to. A siren wailed nearby, breaking the trance. "The meeting," Lyris said, pulling back sharply. "We have to get to the meeting." They scrambled out of the alley, the air between them charged with a new, dangerous electricity. The target was an abandoned subway station beneath the financial district. Aiden had identified the location from a decrypted comms burst Lyris had intercepted. They moved through the maintenance tunnels, navigating by the light of Lyris's wrist comp. The air was stale and cold. They reached a ventilation grate overlooking the old platform. Below them, a portable heavy light projector hummed. Standing in the center of the platform was a human man in a sharp military uniform, General Vance, the head of Earth's Global Defense Coalition. Facing him was a hologram. Lyris gasped softly. It was Admiral Kalen. "We are ready to initiate the cascade," General Vance said, his voice echoing in the tunnel. "The population is primed. The fear index is at critical levels. Once your attack hits the coast, I will have authorization to declare martial law globally. The opposition parties will be silenced." "And the resources?" Kalen's hologram asked. "Yours," Vance confirmed. "We have cleared the mining rights for the lunar colonies and the Antarctic shelf. You get the raw materials to rebuild your fleet. I get the absolute authority to unite my planet. It is a fair trade, Kalen grumbled. But the princess is a variable. She is hesitant. She will be handled, Vance said, checking his watch. Once the war starts, she becomes a casualty, a martyr. Her death will rally your people to total war, and it will give me the excuse to launch the nuclear arsenal at your empty scout ships. We have a deal, Kalen said. The hologram flickered and died. Lyris lay frozen on the metal grate. The cold steel pressed against her cheek, but she felt numb. It wasn't just Kalen. It was Earth, too. It was a stage play, a choreographed genocide, two old men trading millions of lives for power and metal. And she was just a prop, a pretty face to put on a recruitment poster. Remember the princess. Avenge her. She felt a hand on her shoulder. Aiden. He had heard it too. His face was pale, his jaw set hard. We have to go, he mouthed. They crawled back through the tunnel, moving fast. The shock gave way to a cold, hard fury. Lyris didn't feel like a princess anymore. She felt like a weapon that had been pointed in the wrong direction. They didn't speak until they reached the safe house, a dingy motel on the edge of the Jersey swamps. Miles away from the city center, Aiden had picked the lock of a back room. The room smelled of stale tobacco and bleach. There was a single bed with a sagging mattress, a flickering neon sign outside casting frantic red shadows on the wall, and a low, static hum coming from the old air conditioner. Lyris paced the small room, stripping off the morphic suit's outer layer until she was in her undersuit. She felt like she was suffocating. They are going to kill me, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. They are going to kill everyone, Aiden said, sitting on the edge of the bed. He looked exhausted. He ran a hand through his hair. Vance, he's a hero down here. People trust him. If he says the aliens killed the princess, people will line up to die fighting you. I am a fool, Lyris whispered. She stopped pacing and leaned against the peeling wallpaper. I thought I was commanding a mission of peace. I thought I was the civilized one. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. I am just a pawn. Aiden, a foolish, naive girl playing dress-up in a uniform. Aiden watched her. He saw the tears shining in her eyes, not the polite single tear of a royal, but the messy, angry tears of someone whose world has shattered. He got up from the bed and sat down on the floor next to her. The room was so small that their shoulders brushed. You are not a fool, he said firmly. I am. I led the fleet here. I unlocked the door for them. You didn't know. I should have known, she cried, turning to him. I am the future empress. I am supposed to see everything. But I was too busy looking at the stars to look at the people standing right behind me. She buried her face in her hands. Aiden hesitated, then reached out and put a hand on her back. He rubbed slow, comforting circles between her shoulder blades. Hey, he said softly. Look at me. Lyris lifted her head. You are the only one who stopped, he said. Kalen didn't stop. Vance didn't stop. You looked at the screen, and you saw people. That doesn't make you a fool. Lyris, it makes you the only person in this entire mess worth following. Lyris looked at him. The neon light from the window washed over his face, turning his hazel eyes into pools of shadow and light. She shifted her position, turning her body toward him. Her knee bumped against his when she didn't pull back. He didn't pull back. The contact was an anchor point. I am scared. Aiden, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. I have never been defying the council. I have never been alone. You aren't alone, Aiden said. He moved his hand from her back to her arm, his thumb tracing the line of her tricep. We are in a cheap motel in New Jersey, hiding from two armies, with $20 and a stolen shuttle. It is not exactly a palace. Lyris let out a wet, shaky laugh. It is terrible. She agreed. The decor is offensive. Aiden smiled, a real, soft smile. Yeah, but the company isn't bad. The air in the room grew heavy again, charged with the same energy from the alleyway. But this time, there were no drones, no missions, just two people sitting on a dirty carpet, realizing that the only thing standing between them and the dark was each other. Lyris leaned her head until it rested on Aiden's shoulder. It was an act of surrender. She felt him stiffen for a second, then relax, his head leaning to rest against hers. We have to stop them, she whispered. We will, Aiden promised. How? We will figure it out, tomorrow, for tonight. They just sat there, knees touching, breathing in time, listening to the static hum of the walls and the distant sound of a world that didn't know it was about to end. The television in the corner of the motel room was a bulky, archaic device that hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. When it flared to life at 6 in the morning, the screen was a wash of static before resolving into the frantic, high-contrast graphics of a 24-hour news cycle. Lyris sat on the edge of the bed, her knees pulled to her chest, watching the broadcast with a growing sense of nausea. She was still wearing the undersuit of her disguise, the fabric clinging to her like a second skin. Aiden stood by the window, peeling back the heavy curtain just an inch to watch the parking lot. Breaking news. The banner screamed in red, "Alien First Strike." Lyris felt her stomach drop. The footage was grainy, likely shot from a handheld device or a perimeter drone. It showed a military installation nestled in a snowy valley. There was a flash of light, blinding, blue-white, and silent. Then the mountains simply ceased to exist. A crater smoked where the base had been, the surrounding pines flattened by a shockwave that the camera shook to capture. God, Aiden whispered. He dropped the curtain and moved to the television, his face pale in the flickering light. That is Outpost 4, he said, his voice hollow. It is a research station in the Yukon. They monitor weather patterns and deep space telemetry. There are no weapons there. Lyris, just scientists. The news anchor. A woman with perfectly coiffed hair and eyes wide with manufactured panic began to speak. Global Defense Command has confirmed an unprovoked strike by the extraterrestrial aggressors. Casualties are estimated at 300. General Vance has declared a state of planetary emergency. Lyris stared at the screen. She knew that flash. She knew the specific color of the ion discharge. It was a focused plasma lance, a standard ship-to-surface weapon used by her fleet. But her fleet was holding position in orbit. She had not given the order. It was staged, she said, her voice barely audible. Aiden turned to her. His eyes were dark, swimming with a grief that looked dangerously like hatred. Staged, he repeated. Those people are vaporized. Lyris, my friend Sarah runs the cryo lab there. She has a 3-year-old daughter. Are they staged too? It was my technology, Lyris said, standing up. Her hands were trembling. But the firing pattern was wrong. It was too concentrated. That wasn't an orbital strike. That was a ground-based detonation using stolen Imperial capacitors. She was pleading with him, begging him to see the difference, but the image of the smoking crater hung between them like a wall. Before Aiden could respond, Lyris's wrist comp pulsed. A secure, encrypted channel overrode the motel's weak signal. A holographic projection materialized in the center of the dingy room, hovering above the stained carpet. It was a text-only dispatch from the Vigilant Crown. Commander Lyris, Confirmation of preemptive strike on hostile military asset. Earth forces mobilizing. Return to fleet immediately to commence Phase 2. The Council expects your compliance. The message was cold, precise. It treated the 300 dead scientists not as tragedies, but as variables in an equation she was expected to solve. They did it, Lyris whispered, the horror settling into her bones. They fired on your people to force my hand. If I do not return and lead the invasion, I am a traitor. If I do, I become a murderer. Aiden stared at the floating letters. He read them once, twice, and then he laughed. It was a harsh, jagged sound. Compliance. He spat. That is all you are to them, isn't it? A rubber stamp. He stepped toward her, ignoring the hologram which flickered and died as he walked through it. You have to choose, Lyris, right now. I am trying to figure out. There is nothing to figure out, Aiden shouted, his voice cracking. They just murdered 300 people to make a point. You can't play the diplomat anymore. You can't hide behind your titles or your confusion. You are either with the people burning my world, or you are against them. I am not with them, Lyris shouted back, the royal conditioning snapping under the strain. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I asked for a war? Then stop acting like a stunned child and do something, Aiden yelled. He was looming over her now, his anger radiating off him in waves. You talk about honor. You talk about your civilized empire. But right now, your civilization looks exactly like every other butcher who has ever come to this planet to take what isn't theirs. You claim moral superiority, but you are planning extermination because it balances a spreadsheet. Lyris felt the accusation strike her like a physical blow. It hurt because it was true, but her own fear, her own lifetime of suppressed emotion, flared up to meet his anger. And what about your world? She fired back, stepping into his space. You speak of butchers. I have read your history. Aiden, you built bombs to drop on your own cities. You poisoned your own oceans. You are not innocent victims. You are a species that eats itself alive. And now you are judging me because I was born into a system I am trying to fix. We are trying to change, Aiden roared. So am I, Lyris screamed. The silence that followed was sudden and deafening. They stood chest to chest in the cramped room, breathing heavily, their eyes locked. The air between them was electric, charged with the energy of the argument and something else, something darker and more desperate. The anger was there, yes, but beneath it was terror. They weren't just shouting about politics or war. They were shouting because the entire universe was collapsing around them, and the only thing solid left in the wreckage was the person standing opposite them. The person who was supposed to be the enemy. Aiden's face was flushed, his chest heaving. He looked at Lyris, at her violet eyes wide with panic, at the way her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. He saw the princess who terrified him, and the woman who had held his hand in the dark. Slowly, the rage drained out of him, leaving him raw and exposed. I can't hate you, he whispered, and it sounded like a confession of defeat. I want to. God, it would be so much easier if I could just hate you. Lyris felt her own defenses crumble. The rigid posture she had held since childhood, the invisible armor of the throne, melted away. She wasn't a commander. She was just Lyris. I am scared. Aiden, she said, her voice breaking. I am so scared that if I choose the wrong side, I lose everything. But I am more scared that if I go back to that ship, I lose you. The admission hung in the air, fragile and terrifying. Aiden looked at her. He saw the stray strand of hair that had escaped her disguise, a single filament of light glowing softly against her cheek. Without thinking, he reached up. His hand shook slightly. He brushed the filament away, his knuckles grazing the skin of her cheekbone. Her skin was cool, but his touch left a trail of fire. Lyris didn't pull away. She leaned into his hand, her eyes fluttering shut. The touch was reverent. It was the first time in her life someone had touched her without asking for permission, without following a protocol, without wanting something from her rank. He just wanted to touch her. "You have never been allowed to be just you, have you?" Aiden asked softly. Lyris opened her eyes. They were wet with unshed tears. "My body is a symbol," she whispered. "My face is on currency. My voice is used for decrees. I have never been allowed to choose who could come close. I have never been allowed to want." She looked up at him, her gaze searching his face. "And you?" she asked. Aiden let out a shaky breath. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "I haven't let myself want anyone since the war rumors started," he confessed. I thought if I didn't care about anyone, I wouldn't have anything to lose when the sky fell." He laughed humorlessly, a low rumble in his chest. I was wrong. He moved closer. There was no space left between them. The air was thick with the scent of rain and ozone. The boundaries of their worlds, the empire, the resistance, the species barrier, felt like paper walls, easily torn. Lyris looked at his mouth. She felt a pull in her chest, a gravity stronger than any engine on her ship. It was a desire that crossed the line of treason. It was a desire that could get them both executed. She didn't care. Aiden. She breathed. He didn't wait. He lowered his head and captured her lips with his own. It wasn't a polite kiss. It wasn't the chaste, ceremonial affection she had read about in courtly romances. It was desperate. It was a collision of grief and need, a frantic attempt to bridge the gap between two worlds that were trying to destroy each other. Lyris gasped into his mouth, her hands flying up to grip the front of his shirt. She pulled him closer, needing to feel the solidity of him. The sensation was overwhelming. The roughness of his stubble, the heat of his mouth, the taste of salt and coffee. It shattered her conditioning. The cold, logical princess vanished, replaced by a woman who was starving for connection. Aiden groaned low in his throat, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her flush against him. He felt a fierce, protective surge that scared him. He was kissing the enemy commander. He was kissing the woman who could order the destruction of his planet. And he would tear the world apart to keep her safe. They stumbled back, hitting the wall, the kiss deepening, becoming more urgent. It was a battle and a surrender all at once. It was an admission that they were both trapped in a game they couldn't win. And this shared breath, this tangled heat, was the only victory they could steal. They broke apart, gasping, their foreheads resting against each other. Lyris's lips were swollen, her pulse hammering a frantic rhythm against Aiden's chest. That was... Lyris started, her voice breathless. "Treason." Aiden finished. "Yes," she agreed. She looked at him, her eyes fierce and bright. "Let's do it again." She didn't wait for him to answer. She kissed him again, shorter this time, but with a fierce possessiveness that sealed a silent vow between them. They were no longer just allies. They were something new, something dangerous. When they finally pulled apart, the reality of the room rushed back in. The news broadcast was still playing softly. The holographic message had faded, but the order remained. "We have to move," Aiden said, his voice rough. "If they track that message to this location, we are compromised." Lyris nodded, the fog of desire clearing enough to let her sharp, tactical mind engage. But the coldness didn't return. She felt grounded in a way she never had before. "We need proof," she said. "Real proof, not just intuition. We need to know exactly how Vance and the admirals are coordinating. She moved to the rickety desk where Aiden had set up a stolen laptop. She cracked her knuckles, a human gesture she had picked up from him. I have the encryption keys from the secure message, she said. If I reverse the handshake protocol, I can access the sublayer of the Imperial network. And I can bridge that into the Global Defense Database, Aiden said, sliding into the chair next to her. Vance uses a legacy backdoor for his off-book comms. I used to patch it when I was in Intel. They worked side by side, their shoulders touching. The intimacy of the kiss lingered, a warm current running between them, making them a single, cohesive unit. Laris typed with blinding speed, alien syntax flowing across the screen, while Aiden translated and routed the data through Earth's messy, chaotic servers. There. Laris pointed, a file labeled Project Obsidian. She opened it. The screen filled with schematics, not of a fleet but of the Earth itself. Deep beneath the crust, overlaying the tectonic plates, was a glowing web of energy. It looked like a nervous system for the planet. What is that? Aiden asked. It is a lattice, Laris said, her blood running cold. An ancient energy terraforming matrix. My ancestors seeded these on thousands of worlds eons ago. It was meant to stabilize cores, to prevent quakes. She scrolled down the file. The text was in a dialect of High Imperial she barely recognized. They are not using it to stabilize, she whispered. They are reversing the polarity. If they activate that... Aiden trailed off. It will rewrite the geomagnetic field, Laris said. It will emit a frequency that suppresses higher brain function. It won't kill the population. Aiden, it will lobotomize them. It turns the entire human race into docile, mindless drones, a perfect workforce for the resource mines. Aiden stared at the screen. The horror was total. It wasn't extinction. It was slavery on a planetary scale. And Vance agreed to this? He asked. Vance gets to rule the quiet ones, Laris said. Reading the fine print, he gets to be the king of the silence. A sharp crack echoed from the hallway outside. Laris froze. She knew that sound. It was the distinct sonic snap of a silenced kinetic pistol breaching a lock. They are here, she hissed. She grabbed Aiden's arm and pulled him away from the desk just as the motel door exploded inward. Shards of wood and metal sprayed the room. 3 figures stormed in, sleek, armored assassins wearing the stealth black of the Imperial Guard. They moved with unnatural speed, their faces hidden behind mirrored visors. "Get down!" Aiden yelled, shoving Laris behind the overturned bed. A beam of searing red plasma cut through the air where she had been standing, scorching the wallpaper. Laris didn't cower. She reached into her boot and pulled out the collapsible gravity distorter she had smuggled off the shuttle. It was a tool, not a weapon, but she didn't care. She rolled over the mattress, sliding across the floor. She activated the device and threw it at the lead assassin. The gravity field warped instantly. The assassin was yanked sideways with bone-crushing force, slamming into the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. He crumpled, his armor sparking. The second assassin turned toward her, raising a pulse rifle. Laris didn't have a weapon. She raised her hands, summoning a basic hard-light shield from her wrist comp, but she knew it wouldn't hold against a rifle. A sudden flash of light blinded the assassin. Aiden had grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the bedside table and smashed the bulb against the wall, thrusting the jagged, sparking remains into the assassin's faceplate. The assassin reeled back, flailing. Aiden didn't hesitate. He tackled the armored figure, using his weight to drive them into the bathroom door. They crashed through, a tangle of limbs and breaking glass. Laris scrambled to her feet. The third assassin was leveling a weapon at Aiden's back. "No!" she screamed. She sprinted forward, grabbing a shard of the broken door frame. She didn't have her plasma blade, but she had physics. She jammed the wood into the exposed servo joint of the assassin's knee armor. The assassin buckled. Lyris spun, using the momentum to deliver a high-impact kick to the helmet, a combat move she had practiced 1,000 times in the palace dojo but never used in anger. The assassin went down hard. Aiden rolled out of the bathroom, breathing hard, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead. He held the second assassin's pulse rifle in his hands. "Clear," he gasped. Lyris scanned the room with her wrist comp. "No more heat signatures. Clear," she said. She slumped against the wall, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a wave. The room was destroyed. The air smelled of burnt ozone and drywall dust. Aiden looked at her. He dropped the rifle and crossed the room in 2 strides. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands hovering over her arms, checking for injuries. "I am intact," she said, though her voice shook. "You are bleeding." She reached up and touched the cut on his forehead. The blood was bright red against his skin. "Sit," she ordered gently. They sat on the edge of the ruined bed. Lyris found a first aid kit in the bathroom rubble. Her hands, usually so steady, were trembling as she dabbed antiseptic on his wound. Aiden hissed through his teeth. "I thought humans were tough," Lyris teased, her voice weak. "We are," Aiden gritted out, "but that stuff stings. And for the record, alien princesses bruise just as easily when they are reckless." He pointed to a purpling bruise forming on her arm where she had hit the floor. Lyris looked at it. It was an ugly mark on her perfect skin. She smiled. "It is a souvenir," she said. Aiden watched her as she cleaned his cut. His eyes were soft, aching with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. "You fight like a demon," he said. "I was top of my class in kinetic theory," she murmured, applying a bandage. "I just never thought I would use it to smash a motel room in New Jersey." Aiden chuckled, but it turned into a wince. He caught her hand as she pulled away. "Thank you," he said, "for saving my back." "You saved mine," she replied. They held the gaze for a moment, the humor fading into a solemn understanding. They were partners now, not by circumstance, but by blood and choice. "We can't stay here," Lyris said, pulling her hand back reluctantly. "That squad was just the first wave. They will send more, and they will send heavier ordnance." Aiden stood up, testing his limbs. He winced, but nodded. "We need to go off-grid," he said. "Deep off-grid. If we use credit cards, phones, or even standard transport, they will find us." "Where do we go?" Lyris asked. Aiden looked at the destroyed room, then at the laptop which had miraculously survived the firefight. "We go where the lattice is," he said. "The schematics showed the control nexus. It is not in a city, it is in the middle of nowhere." He grabbed the laptop and shoved it into his backpack. "We have to cross half the continent without being seen," he said. "We are fugitives, Lyris, wanted by the Empire and the Global Defense Coalition." Lyris stood up. She looked at the wreckage of the life she was supposed to have, the throne, the fleet, the safety. Then she looked at Aiden, standing amidst the broken glass, battered and defiant. "Let them hunt us," she said, her voice hard with a new resolve. "We have something they don't." "What is that?" Aiden asked. Lyris touched the bandage on his forehead, then the spot on her own cheek where he had kissed her. "Something to fight for." She grabbed her coat. "Let's go save your world, Aiden." They stepped out of the ruined motel room and into the cold morning air. They didn't look back. The invasion had begun, but the resistance, the real resistance, started now, with two people in a stolen car driving toward the horizon. The world rushed past them in a blur of gray concrete, verdant green, and scorching white sand. For 2 weeks, Lyris and Aiden ceased to be a princess and a prisoner. They became ghosts, slipping through the cracks of a planet that was holding its breath, waiting for the sky to fall. They moved constantly, fueled by stolen nutrient packs and adrenaline. Lyris saw Earth not through the pristine lens of an orbital scanner, but through the grime of its transit systems and the silence of its ruins. She saw the scars of the old wars Aiden had told her about. Cratered cities reclaimed by vines, coastlines reshaped by rising tides, but she also saw the stubborn, unkillable life that thrived in the margins. The chase caught up with them outside a megacity in the Pacific sector. They had hacked the control nodes of a cargo maglev train, riding the roof of a container unit as it screamed along an elevated track 300 feet above the urban sprawl. The wind whipped Lyris's hair into a frenzy, stinging her eyes, but she didn't look away. "Drones!" Aiden shouted over the roar of the wind. He pointed aft. 3 hunter-seeker drones, sleek black arrowheads with burning red eyes, dropped from the cloud layer. They were fast, closing the distance in seconds. Plasma bolts chewed up the track behind them, sending molten slag raining down into the streets below. "Hold on!" Lyris yelled. She stood up on the swaying container, her boots magnetizing to the metal. She didn't have a weapon. She was the weapon. She reached out with her mind, tapping into the gravity manipulation implant at the base of her skull. It was a tool meant for ceremonial lifting or stabilizing ships. Not combat, but desperation was a powerful teacher. She grabbed the gravity field around a rusted, derelict hovercar sitting on a nearby rooftop. With a grunt of exertion, she wrenched the heavy vehicle into the air. "Lyris!" Aiden screamed as a drone strafed them, the heat of the bolt singing his jacket. She swung her arm in a violent arc. The hovercar became a projectile, hurtling across the gap and smashing into the lead drone. The impact was thunderous. Metal shrieked as the drone spun out of control, crashing into its wingman in a ball of fire. The third drone corrected its flight path, locking onto Lyris. She was drained. The exertion of moving that much mass made her vision swim. She stumbled, the magnetic lock on her boots failing. Aiden lunged. He didn't think about the physics or the speed. He just threw himself across the gap between containers, tackling Lyris around the waist and dragging her down behind the lip of the steel roof just as the drone fired. The bolt vaporized the space where her head had been a second before. "Stay down!" Aiden gasped, pressing her into the cold metal. He pulled a jammer from his belt, a jury-rigged device he had built from scavenged toaster parts and a stolen military radio. He waited for the drone to swoop low, listening to the whine of its turbines. "Now," he whispered. He activated the pulse. The drone's guidance system seized. It veered sharply right, clipping the maglev rail and tumbling into the abyss below. The train rushed on, carrying them away from the smoke. Lyris lay on her back, staring at the smoggy sky, her chest heaving. Aiden was hovering over her, his face streaked with soot, his eyes wide with terror and relief. "You threw a car," he wheezed, a hysterical grin breaking through. "You literally threw a Buick at them. It was an inefficient projectile." Lyris panted, a smile tugging at her own lips. The aerodynamics were terrible. They laughed then, a jagged, manic sound that was lost in the wind, holding on to each other as the city blurred into the countryside. The landscape shifted again. The relentless neon of the city gave way to the silence of the deep desert. They crossed the border zone on foot, moving only at night to avoid the thermal satellites. The heat radiating from the sand was suffocating, a physical weight that pressed against their skin. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the vast, terrifying expanse of stars that Lyris used to call her kingdom. They were being hunted by ground-based autonomous machines, four-legged metal beasts that prowled the dunes with sensors tuned to the frequency of a human heartbeat. Lyris learned the art of stillness. She learned to bury herself in the sand, slowing her metabolic rate until she was cold to the touch, while Aiden lay beside her, covered in a thermal blanket, his breathing shallow and controlled. During one long wait in a rocky crevice, while a machine chittered and stalked 10 yards away, Aiden took her hand. He didn't speak. He just squeezed her fingers, a rhythmic pressure that matched his own pulse. It was a language of survival. I am here. You are here. We are not dead yet. When the machine finally moved on, fading into the dunes, they didn't let go. They walked the rest of the night hand in hand, two specks of life in a graveyard of sand. Their journey led them to a hidden outpost deep in the sequoia forests of the north. It was a rebel stronghold, a network of bunkers dug beneath the roots of trees that were older than the empire itself. The group that met them was small, a ragtag collection of Earth soldiers who had refused the stand-down orders and, shockingly, 2 defectors from Lyris's own fleet. The meeting was tense. The rebels stood with weapons raised, their eyes darting between Aiden and the woman who wore the face of their enemy. She is the commander. A scarred human sergeant spat, leveling his rifle at Lyris. She is the one who ordered the fleet to orbit. Why shouldn't I put a bullet in her right now? Because she is the only reason you are not already Ash, Aiden said, stepping in front of her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He spoke with the quiet authority of a man who had seen the truth. She stopped the bombardment. She is fighting the Council. She is with us. The alien defectors, tall and thin with skin like polished obsidian, stepped forward. They looked at Lyris with a mixture of awe and shame. Highness, one of them said, bowing his head. We heard the transmission, the one where you delayed the strike. We thought it was a glitch. A commander showing mercy? It does not happen. It happens now, Lyris said. Her voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at the human sergeant. I was raised to believe that loyalty to the crown was the highest virtue. I was taught that the empire is infallible. She took a step closer to the gun barrel. But loyalty without morality is just obedience, she said. And I am done obeying. I am not here as a princess. I am here as a traitor to a corrupt throne. If that is not enough for you, then shoot. But know that you are killing the only person who knows the encryption codes to the lattice weapon. The sergeant stared at her. The silence stretched, heavy with the smell of pine needles and gun oil. Slowly, he lowered the rifle. You got guts, lady, he grunted. I will give you that. Later that night, sitting around a smokeless fire, Lyris watched Aiden talking to the alien defectors. He was asking them about their homes, their families, sharing a ration bar with men he had been trained to kill. She realized then how small her universe had been. She had thought in terms of species and borders. Aiden thought in terms of people. He caught her watching him and smiled. It was a tired, dusty smile, but it warmed her more than the fire. You were good today, he said, coming over to sit beside her. I was terrified, she admitted. That is why you were good, he replied. The intel from the rebels pointed them to the coast. The next piece of the puzzle lay in an underwater data vault, a pre-war server farm that had been submerged by rising sea levels but was still active, housing the backup archives of the conspirators. They approached the site in wetsuits, swimming through the submerged ruins of a coastal city. The water was dark and cold, but as they descended, Bioluminescent algae lit the ruins in ghostly shades of blue and green. They activated their personal cloaking generators. To any passive sensor, they were just drifting currents of water. The vault was guarded by automated turrets. Lyris and Aiden moved like a single organism, communicating with hand signals. Aiden hacked the perimeter sensors while Lyris used her gravity manipulation to gently deflect the sonar pulses, creating a blind spot in the acoustic net. Inside the airlock, the water drained away, leaving them dripping and shivering. They accessed the mainframe, the screen filled with data. Lyris's eyes scanned the scrolling text, her face pale in the monitor's glow. "It is worse than we thought," she whispered. She downloaded the files, terabytes of encrypted communications, blueprints, and timelines. It was the smoking gun. It was the proof that the war was a lie manufactured by two dying power structures desperate to survive. "We have it," Aiden said, pulling the drive. "We have everything. Now we just have to live long enough to use it," Lyris said. They didn't stop until they were miles inland, putting distance between themselves and the coast. Exhaustion was beginning to fray their edges. They found shelter in a dilapidated farmhouse on the outskirts of a ghost town. The house had been abandoned in a hurry years ago. It was dusty, the air thick with the scent of dry wood and old paper. But it was intact. Lyris walked through the living room, her fingers trailing over the surfaces. She saw a child's drawing taped to the wall, a stick figure family standing under a yellow sun. She saw a pair of reading glasses left on a side table. She saw a half-finished knitting project in a basket. It felt painfully intimate. It was a museum of a life interrupted. "It is so quiet," Lyris whispered. "It is a home," Aiden said, locking the front door and jamming a chair under the handle. Or it was. They found the bedroom upstairs. There was only one bed, the mattress stripped but intact. Outside, the wind howled through the eaves, a lonely, mournful sound. "We need to sleep," Aiden said. He looked at the floor, then at the bed. "I will take the rug." "No," Lyris said quickly. "The thermal dampening field won't cover the floor. The drones scan for heat signatures near ground level. We need to be elevated, and..." She hesitated, looking at him. "And we need to conserve body heat." She finished, the logic sounding flimsy even to her own ears. Aiden looked at her. He was covered in grime, his eyes shadowed with fatigue, but his gaze was steady. "Okay," he said. They lay down in the dark, fully clothed, facing each other. The bed was narrow. There was nowhere to go. The distance between them was measured in inches, but it felt like a canyon they were both afraid to bridge. Lyris could feel the heat radiating from him. She could hear the slow, rhythmic intake of his breath. The adrenaline of the maglev chase, the terror of the underwater vault, the weight of the data drive in her pocket, it all faded. All that was left was the man lying next to her. "Aiden," she whispered into the dark. "Yeah? What would you be doing if none of this had happened? If the fleet never came?" Aiden was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," he said softly. "I was a linguist before they drafted me into special ops. I probably would have been teaching. Maybe at a university, grading papers, drinking too much bad coffee, worrying about rent." He shifted, his knee brushing hers. "What about you?" "I would be sitting on a throne of spun glass," Lyris said. "I would be listening to petitions from planetary governors. I would be marrying a duke from the Antares system whom I have met twice. I would be perfect. And I would be completely, utterly alone." Aiden turned his head, in the faint moonlight filtering through the dusty window. His eyes caught hers. "You aren't alone now." "No," Lyris admitted. I am not. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy with everything they hadn't said. I am afraid, Lyris confessed, her voice trembling. Not of dying. I made peace with that when I left the ship. I am afraid that even if we win, I don't know who I am anymore. I am not a princess. I am not a commander. You are Lyris, Aiden said. Just Lyris. Just Lyris is plenty. He said. Just Lyris threw a Buick at a drone. Just Lyris saved my life 3 times this week. He reached out, his hand hovering in the space between them. Just Lyris is the most incredible person I have ever met. Lyris looked at his hand. She thought of the protocols. She thought of the Duke from Antares. She thought of the cold, sterile touch of the royal physicians. Then she thought of Aiden's hand holding hers in the desert. I don't want to be a symbol tonight, she whispered. I don't want to be a diplomat. I want to be seen, not as a prize or a target, just as a woman. The raw honesty of it hung in the air. Aiden felt his heart slam against his ribs. He was terrified. He was a soldier with a prisoner, a human with an alien royal. Every code of ethics he had ever learned screamed that this was wrong, that he was taking advantage of a desperate situation. But then he looked at her. He saw the way she was looking at him, not with royal command, but with open, vulnerable hope. Lyris, he warned, his voice rough. If I touch you, I can't promise I can stop wanting you. I have been fighting it since the moment you looked at me on the bridge. Don't fight it, she breathed. Please, don't fight it. She moved first. She closed the inches between them, sliding her hand up his chest, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. Aiden crumbled. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into him. The contact was electric, a sudden grounding of 2 live wires. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling the scent of her, ozone, starlight, and the dust of his own world. Lyris let out a sound that was half sob, half sigh, pressing her body against the length of his. It wasn't a frenzy. It was a slow, deliberate drowning. His hands moved over her back, tracing the line of her spine, mapping her reality. He treated her not like porcelain, but like something precious and strong. Lyris felt the tension of 22 years melt away. For the first time, she wasn't holding the weight of an empire. She was being held. They moved together in the dark, a tangle of limbs and whispered names. The kisses were deep and slow, tasting of survival. Every touch was an affirmation. I choose you. I choose this. Damn the war, there in the dust of a stranger's house, with the wind howling outside. They built a shelter out of each other. It was a profound, aching intimacy that went beyond skin. It was the weaving together of 2 souls who had found their home in the most unlikely place in the universe. Morning came with a pale gray light that filtered through the dirty curtains. Lyris woke first. She lay still for a moment, disoriented by the warmth. Aiden was asleep, his arm thrown heavy over her waist, his face pressed into the pillow. He looked younger in his sleep, the lines of stress smoothed away. She watched him for a long time, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the dark fan of his lashes. She felt a fierce, terrifying swell of love in her chest. It wasn't the strategic alliance of the night before. It was simple, quiet, and absolute. She carefully disentangled herself and slipped out of bed. 20 minutes later, Aiden woke to the smell of burning. He stumbled down the stairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his hand instinctively going to the pistol on his belt. Lyris? He found her in the kitchen. She was wearing one of his spare shirts, which hung to her knees, and she was staring intently at a frying pan on an ancient gas stove. Smoke was billowing up. I have engaged the thermal heating unit, she announced without turning around. However, the nutritional discs are responding aggressively. Aiden stared at her. Then he looked at the pan. Lyris, those are hockey pucks. I mean, burned pancakes. I followed the instructions, she insisted, turning to him. Her face was smudged with soot, and she looked utterly, devastatingly beautiful. It said, "Cook until golden brown." That is charcoal black. Aiden laughed. He walked over to her, gently taking the spatula from her hand. Warrior Princess versus the frying pan, he teased, and the pan wins in the first round. Lyris scowled, but her eyes were dancing. The pan had a tactical advantage. The heat distribution is uneven. Aiden turned off the stove. He looked at her, and the laughter faded into a soft smile. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied, leaning into his touch. They stood there in the smoky kitchen, the burned breakfast forgotten. The awkwardness they both feared wasn't there. Instead, there was an ease, a lightness that felt like defiance. The world was ending. The fleets were gathering, but they were here, making bad pancakes and smiling. "We have to look at the data," Aiden said eventually, regret coloring his tone. "I know." Lyris sighed. They sat at the dusty kitchen table, booting up the laptop. Lyris plugged in the drive from the underwater vault. The files opened. It was a countdown. Phase 4, the summit, Lyris read. She pulled up the details. "It is happening in 3 days, she said, her voice turning cold. "A peace summit. My father's flagship, the Solarian, is docking with the Earth Orbital Station Unity. The Council and the Global Defense Coalition leaders will be there." "To sign a treaty?" Aiden asked. "No," Lyris said, pointing to the schematic. "To activate the lattice. Look at the power draw. They are going to use the station's reactor to jumpstart the global grid. They are going to trigger the pulse while the whole world is watching the broadcast, thinking they are witnessing peace. They will wipe our minds on live television," Aiden realized, horror dawning. They looked at each other. The sanctuary of the farmhouse dissolved. The war was back. "We have to get up there," Lyris said. "To the station? That is impossible. We have no ship. We are fugitives." Lyris looked at the screen, then at Aiden. The softness of the morning was gone, replaced by the steel of the commander. "We don't need a ship," she said. "We have something better. We have a captive." Aiden blinked. "What?" She stood up, pacing the small kitchen. "I am the Princess Commander. I was kidnapped by a rogue human operative. If I return to the fleet with my captor in chains, claiming I overpowered him and escaped, they will let you ride in," Aiden finished. "It is a Trojan horse," Lyris said. "I bring you to the summit as a prisoner. We infiltrate the station from the inside." Aiden looked at her. It was insane. It was suicidal. It required them to walk into a room filled with the people who wanted them dead, pretending to hate each other. "You will have to hurt me," he said quietly, "to make it look real." "I know," Lyris said. Her eyes were dark with pain. "You will have to give me to them." "I know." She stopped pacing and stood in front of him. She took his face in her hands. "But we are going to burn their plan to the ground. Aiden, we are going to save your home. And then I am never letting you go again," she vowed. Aiden covered her hands with his own. He kissed her palms, one by one. "Let's go catch a ride, Princess." They packed their meager gear, leaving the farmhouse as they found it, silent and waiting. But as they walked out into the sunlight, they weren't running anymore. They were marching toward the sky. The orbital station Unity hung in the void like a silver needle threading the gap between the heavy, gray hull of the Imperial flagship and the fragile blue curve of Earth. To the billions watching the live feeds on the planet below, it was a beacon of hope, a shining testament to a new era of cooperation. To Lyris, watching it grow larger in the viewport of her command shuttle, it looked like the barrel of a gun pressed against the temple of the world. She stood in the center of the shuttle cabin, her back rigid, her hands clasped behind her. She was no longer the fugitive in stolen clothes with soot on her face. She was the princess commander of the 7 systems. She wore a gown of woven starlight and ballistic mesh, the high collar framing her face like a blade. A circlet of platinum rested on her brow, heavy with the weight of her ancestors. Behind her, kneeling on the metal deck, was Aiden. He was back in chains. Real chains this time, heavy. Magnetic manacles clamped around his wrists and ankles, forcing him into a posture of submission. His face was bruised, a detail they had added with careful makeup to sell the struggle, and his clothes were torn. "Do not look at me," Lyris said. Her voice was ice. It had to be. The shuttle's internal sensors were recording everything for the High Council's archives. Aiden kept his head bowed, staring at the floor. "As you command." "Highness," he rasped. The formality of his tone made her chest ache. Just hours ago, in a dusty farmhouse, he had held her while she wept. He had kissed the soot from her cheek. Now, he was a prop in a play that could end with both of their executions. The shuttle shuddered as it engaged the docking clamps of the station. The hiss of pressurization filled the cabin. "Remember," Lyris said, her voice projecting for the microphones but her intent focused entirely on him. "You are a traitor to your species and a failed insurgent. You exist only because I allow it. If you speak out of turn, I will have your tongue removed before the trial." "Understood," Aiden mumbled. The airlock cycled open. A phalanx of Imperial guards in ceremonial crimson armor waited on the other side, flanked by human soldiers in the gray dress uniforms of the Global Defense Coalition. At the center of the reception committee stood Admiral Kalen and General Vance. Lyris stepped out of the shuttle. She did not hesitate. She did not look at the soldiers. She walked with the terrifying grace of a predator entering a room full of prey. 2 guards moved to grab Aiden, hauling him up by his arms. He stumbled, the chains clattering loudly. "Admiral," Lyris said, stopping in front of the towering granite figure of Kalen. "Highness," Kalen rumbled. His black eyes scanned her, looking for cracks. "We feared you were lost. The report said you were taken hostage by insurgents." "I was," Lyris lied smoothly. "They were disorganized and pathetic. I neutralized their leader and reclaimed my asset." She gestured vaguely at Aiden, not deigning to look at him. "He thought he could use me as leverage. He failed." General Vance stepped forward. He was a small man with eyes like polished flint, sweating slightly in the recycled air. "We are relieved, Princess, and we are grateful you recovered the prisoner. He has intimate knowledge of our defense grids. He is a security risk. He is my prisoner." "General," Lyris cut him off. "He stays in my custody until the summit is concluded. Then, you may have what is left of him." Kalen and Vance exchanged a look. It was brief, a microsecond flicker of calculation. They didn't trust her, but they couldn't arrest her. Not here. Not with the cameras of 2 worlds watching the arrival. "Very well," Kalen said. "The summit begins in 2 hours. The Grand Hall is prepared." Lyris swept past them, her cape billowing. "Bring the prisoner," she commanded the guards. "And do not be gentle." The holding cell was a sterile white box located in the security sector of the station. The guards threw Aiden inside, letting him crash hard onto the floor, before retreating and activating the energy barrier. Lyra stood on the other side of the shimmering field. She waited until the guards had turned the corner at the end of the corridor. She deactivated the audio sensors on her side of the barrier with a subtle flick of her wrist comp, a trick Aiden had taught her during the drive across the desert. "Are you all right?" she mouthed, her hands pressing against the invisible wall. Aiden sat up, wiping a trickle of fake blood from his lip. He flashed a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "I have had better welcomes," he whispered. "Your guards have a heavy grip." "It is necessary," Lyris whispered back. "I know. You were perfect out there. You terrified me." Lyris let out a shaky breath. "I terrified myself." She glanced at the chronometer on the wall. They had very little time. "I have uploaded the station schematics to your neural implant," she said, speaking rapidly. "The maintenance tunnels run behind this wall. In 20 minutes, the shift change will occur. The sensors will cycle for 10 seconds. That is your window." 10 seconds, Aiden repeated. "No pressure. You have to get to the core. Aiden, you have to place the jammer on the primary conduit." "I will do it," he promised. "But Lyris, the summit, you will be in the room with them. If I trigger the jammer and they realize it is sabotage—" "I will handle Kalen," she said, her voice hardening. "Just stop the signal." Footsteps echoed in the corridor. The patrol was returning. Lyra stepped back from the barrier, her face snapping back into a mask of imperious disdain. She tapped the control panel, increasing the voltage of the field until it hummed with an angry, lethal pitch. "Reflect on your errors." "Scum," she said loudly. Aiden looked at her. Beneath the sarcasm and the bruises, his eyes were steady. "Long live the Empire," he mocked, bowing his head. The preparations for the summit were a study in opulence and hypocrisy. The grand hall of the station was a cavernous space with a floor of transparent aluminum, offering a dizzying, terrifying view of Earth rotating below. Banners of the Empire, silver and violet, hung alongside the flags of the Global Defense Coalition. Lyra stood in her private preparation chamber, staring at her reflection. Her handmaidens, silent cybernetic drones, adjusted the folds of her gown. She felt sick. The data they had stolen from the underwater vault was burning a hole in her mind. It wasn't just an occupation. It wasn't just a resource war. The lattice weapon was designed to emit a psychoactive frequency that would rewrite the neural pathways of the human population. It would erase resistance, yes, but it would also erase creativity, defiance, love. It would turn 4 billion people into biological machines, and then she was the face of it. A chime sounded at the door. "Enter," she said. Admiral Kalen walked in. He dismissed the drones with a wave of his hand. "You seem troubled, Highness," he said, standing behind her. "I am contemplating the weight of history," Lyris replied, watching him in the mirror. "It is a heavy burden," Kalen agreed, "but necessary. Your father would be proud. You have shown resilience." Returning with the prisoner was a strong statement. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a low rumble. There were rumors. "Lyris. Disturbing rumors. That you had defected. That you had been seduced by the human's primitive ideology." Lyris turned slowly to face him. She summoned every ounce of her royal training, every lesson in arrogance she had ever received. "Seduced?" she repeated, arching a brow. "By a muddy creature from a backwater rock. You forget yourself, Admiral. I am a daughter of the sun. I do not defect. I conquer." Kalen studied her face. He looked for the hesitation, The softness he had despised in her before, he found only cold violet fire. "Good," he said finally. "Then you are ready for the activation." "Activation?" Laris asked innocently. "I thought this was a signing ceremony." "It is," Kalen said, "a signing of a new reality. The lattice requires a biometric key to initiate the frequency. A royal key." Laris felt her blood freeze. "Me? You," Kalen confirmed. "Your genetic signature is the only one the ancient systems recognize. You will place your hand on the central pedestal during the Unity ritual. You will unknowingly, to the public at least, authorize the pulse." He smiled, a rare and terrible expression. "You are not just the commander, Laris. You are the weapon." He bowed and left the room. Laris stood paralyzed. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was the literal trigger. If she refused to touch the pedestal, they would know she was a traitor. If she touched it, she ended humanity. She tapped her comms implant, praying the channel was still secure. "Aiden," she whispered, static. Then, a breathless voice. "I am here. I am in the vents. It is tight. Laris, Aiden, the plan has changed. It is me. I am the key." "What?" "The lattice. It is keyed to my DNA. I have to physically activate it." There was a pause. "Then don't touch it," Aiden said. "I have to," she hissed. "If I refuse, Kalen will kill me and use my severed hand. He is pragmatic enough to do it." "Jesus," Aiden breathed. Okay. New plan. You have to stall. I am approaching the core now. If I can sever the hardline connection between the pedestal and the lattice, you can touch it all you want and nothing will happen. But I need time." "How much time?" 10 minutes. Maybe 15. "I don't have 15 minutes. Aiden. The ceremony starts in 5. Then talk fast. Princess, improvise." The grand hall was filling up. Delegates from Earth's remaining nations mingled with Imperial officers. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne, oblivious to the fact that they were serving the architects of their own enslavement. Laris entered the hall to the sound of trumpets. The crowd parted. She walked the long aisle of transparent floor, the earth moving beneath her feet. She felt the gaze of millions. She took her place on the raised dais at the front of the room. General Vance stood to her left. Admiral Kalen stood to her right. Between them was a waist-high pedestal made of an alien black stone, pulsating with a faint rhythmic light. The broadcast cameras circled them like vultures. General Vance stepped to the microphone. "Citizens of Earth, brothers of the stars," he began, his voice booming. "Today we end the fear. Today we embrace a future of order and stability." Laris scanned the room. She saw the exits blocked by guards. She saw the anticipation in Kalen's eyes. She needed to buy time. She looked for a distraction. She looked for anything. Her eyes landed on the side entrance. 2 guards were dragging a prisoner in to witness the ceremony, a requirement Laris had insisted on earlier to break his spirit. It was Aiden. He was shoved into a kneeling position near the front row. He looked up at her. He gave a microscopic shake of his head. Not yet. He wasn't in the core. He had been caught? No. There were no new bruises. He must have doubled back. Why? Then she saw it. A guard standing behind Aiden tapped his own thigh twice. It was a signal. The guard wasn't a guard. It was one of the rebels disguised in Imperial armor. Aiden had positioned himself in the room to be her backup. Vance finished his speech. He turned to Laris. "And now, Her Highness Princess Laris will sanctify this union." The room went silent. Laris stepped forward. She looked at the pedestal. It hummed, calling to the nanites in her blood. She looked at Kalen. "Before we begin, she said, her voice clear and amplified. I wish to address the people of Earth directly. Kalen frowned. That is not in the protocol. I am the protocol, she snapped. She turned to the cameras. People of Earth, she said, you look at the stars and see salvation. You think we come with gifts. She paused. She had to drag this out, but gifts are rarely free. I want to tell you a story about my own world, about how we achieved our unity. She began to speak. She improvised a history lesson, weaving a tale of war and sorrow. She spoke slowly, deliberately, using every rhetorical trick she knew to hold the room. 5 minutes passed. Kalen shifted uncomfortably. Highness, he hissed, the time is now. One moment, Admiral, she said, not looking at him. She continued speaking. She spoke of the cost of freedom. She looked at Aiden. He was watching her intensely, his eyes darting to the pedestal, then to the floor beneath it. 10 minutes. Vance stepped forward. Princess, this is highly irregular. The window for the transmission is closing. I am not finished, Lyris shouted, her voice echoing. Kalen had had enough. He stepped forward and grabbed her arm. His grip was bruising. Enough, he growled, his voice low enough that the microphones wouldn't catch it. Touch the stone, Lyris, or I will break your arm and force it down myself. Lyris looked at him. She saw the murder in his eyes. She looked at Aiden. He nodded. She pulled her arm free from Kalen. Very well, Admiral, she said. Let us have unity. She reached out. Her hand hovered over the black stone. The air in the room grew heavy. Static electricity prickled her skin. She slammed her hand down onto the surface. Immediately, a shockwave of cold light blasted outward from the pedestal. The floor beneath them lit up with a complex geometric web. The lattice was waking up. Lyris felt it. It was like a hook sinking into her chest. The machine read her DNA, verified her lineage, and accepted the command. Sequence initiated, a mechanical voice intoned. Lyris looked at Aiden in panic. It hadn't worked. He hadn't cut the line. But Aiden wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the rebel guard behind him. Now! Aiden shouted. The rebel guard drew a hidden pulse pistol and fired, not at the soldiers, but at the floor. Specifically, at a junction box directly beneath the dais where Lyris stood. At the same moment, Aiden lunged. He didn't run for the exit. He ran for her. The blast blew a hole in the transparent floor. Smoke and sparks erupted. The connection between the pedestal and the core wavered. The lights flickered. Kalen roared, drawing his sword. Treason! He swung the blade at Lyris. She didn't have a weapon. She threw herself backward, dodging the strike by inches. The blade carved a gash in the podium. Guards! Kalen screamed. Kill them! Chaos erupted. The delegates screamed and scrambled for cover. The Imperial Guards opened fire on Aiden, who was sprinting across the open floor, sliding under tables, dodging plasma bolts. Lyris scrambled to her feet. She was cut off. Kalen stood between her and the exit, his sword humming with energy. You disappointing child, Kalen spat. You had everything, and you threw it away for a pet. He raised the sword for a killing blow. Suddenly, a maintenance hatch in the ceiling above them blew open. A figure dropped down. A rebel soldier? No. It was Lyris's handmaiden drone, but it moved with unnatural speed. It tackled Kalen, knocking him sideways. Lyris didn't question it. She ran. She collided with Aiden in the center of the room. He grabbed her, spinning her around as a volley of fire chewed up the floor where she had been standing. Did you cut it? She screamed over the noise. I severed the primary, Aiden yelled, firing a stolen pistol back at the guards. But the backup is cycling. The signal is still building. We have to go to the source, Lyris shouted. Then we have to go to the reactor. They ran toward the service corridors, moving as a single unit. Lyris used her gravity implant to pull a heavy banquet table into the path of their pursuers. Aiden provided covering fire, his shots disciplined and precise. They burst into the maintenance hallway, the heavy blast doors slamming shut behind them. Aiden jammed the lock with a pulse charge. They were alone in the red emergency lighting. The sound of the alarm was deafening. Aiden leaned against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting. He was gasping for air. That went well. He wheezed. Lyris stood over him. Her gown was torn. Her crown was crooked. She looked wild and magnificent. She grabbed him by the lapels of his jacket and hauled him up. "We are not done," she said fiercely. She shoved him against the wall. But this time, it wasn't to hide. She kissed him. It was a kiss of adrenaline and terror and absolute defying love. It lasted only a second, but it burned like a sun. She pulled back, her forehead resting against his. "If we die down there," she whispered. "We won't," Aiden said. "I know." She lied. She pulled away and turned toward the dark descent of the reactor shaft. "Come on, prisoner," she commanded, a ghost of a smile on her lips. Aiden checked the charge on his pistol. He smiled back. "Right behind you, Highness." They began to run into the dark, while above them, the lattice hummed, hungry for a mind it could not control. The grand hall of the orbital station Unity was silent, save for the low, malevolent thrum of the black pedestal beneath Lyris's hand. Thousands of eyes, human and imperial, present in the room and watching via quantum link across 2 star systems, were fixed on her. They expected a gesture of submission. They expected the activation of a weapon that would enslave a planet under the guise of peace. Lyris looked at Admiral Kalen, whose hand was gripping the hilt of his ceremonial sword. She looked at General Vance, who was wiping sweat from his upper lip. Then she looked past the transparent floor, down to the blue curve of the earth. It was not a target. It was a home. She pressed her hand flat against the obsidian surface, but she did not speak the activation mantra. Instead, she exhaled a sharp, jagged breath and engaged the subroutine she and Aiden had buried in the station's databanks during their frantic descent. The holographic projectors lining the massive hall flickered. The banners of the Empire and the flags of Earth dissolved into static. In their place, a towering wall of data materialized. Gasps rippled through the crowd. It was a chaotic cascade of incriminating evidence, audio recordings of Kalen negotiating resource quotas with human elites, blueprints of the mind control lattice, and video logs of the staged attacks on both fleets. It was the naked, ugly truth of the conspiracy, scrolling in high definition for the entire galaxy to see. Lyris stepped back from the pedestal, her voice amplified by the room's acoustics. "There is no peace treaty," she declared. Her voice shook, not with fear, but with the sheer force of her rage. "There is only a sale. You are being traded like livestock." She pointed a trembling finger at Kalen. "This man, and your own leaders, have conspired to turn this planet into a mining colony. The weapon beneath us is not a shield. It is a leash." General Vance lunged for the podium microphone. "Cut the feed!" he screamed. "Cut it now!" But the feed was locked. The truth was out. Lyris looked directly into the camera drone hovering before her. She stripped away the mask of the Princess Commander. She let them see the girl who had eaten burnt pancakes in a farmhouse, the girl who had learned to love the chaos of a human heart. "I was part of this," she admitted, her voice raw. "I was blind. I let my title blind me to the suffering my fleet brought to your skies. I am guilty." She raised her chin, her violet eyes burning. "But I will not be a butcher. I will not invade his home." The silence broke. It shattered into a roar of panic and fury. Treason, Kalen bellowed. He drew his sword, the plasma edge crackling to life. Kill her! Kill the traitor! The room erupted. Imperial guards loyal to Kalen leveled their weapons. But others hesitated, staring at the holographic proof floating above them. Human soldiers looked at their commanders, then at the data, their discipline fracturing. Aiden, who had been kneeling in the front row, moved before the first shot was fired. He didn't run away. He ran into the chaos. He tackled a guard who was aiming a rifle at Lyrus's back, driving his shoulder into the alien's solar plexus. They went down in a tangle of limbs and armor. Go! Aiden shouted to her, scrambling for the guard's dropped weapon. Get to command! I am holding the hall, Lyrus screamed back. She slammed her hand onto the pedestal again, this time accessing the station's defensive grid. She sealed the blast doors, trapping the conspirators inside with her. The station shuddered violently. The lights turned a blood-red emergency hue. Kalen charged the dais, swinging his blade. Lyrus dodged, the heat of the plasma singing the fabric of her gown. She didn't have a weapon, but she had the station. She swiped her hand through the air, and the gravity plating beneath Kalen reversed. The Admiral was flung upward toward the ceiling, flailing in zero-G. Aiden regained his footing. He saw Lyrus commanding the chaos like a conductor, shielding civilians with force fields and flinging attackers aside. But he knew it wasn't enough. The lattice was still cycling up. The failsafe had been triggered manually by someone in the panic. He had to get to the core. He sprinted for the service hatch, dodging a spray of kinetic rounds. A human soldier stepped in his path, raising a sidearm. Wait! Aiden yelled, holding up his hands. Look at the screen. Look at what they are doing to us. The soldier hesitated. He looked at the scrolling data, a file showing the planned lobotomy of his own city. His hand wavered. Go, the soldier whispered, stepping aside. Aiden didn't look back. He dove into the maintenance shaft just as a grenade detonated near the podium, shaking the very foundations of the station. The journey to the station's spine was a descent into hell. Aiden raced through the narrow corridors, his breath tearing at his lungs. The station was tearing itself apart. The conflict in the Grand Hall had triggered automated security protocols. Bulkheads were slamming shut, steam vented from ruptured pipes, and gravity fluctuated wildly, sending him slamming into walls and ceilings. He fought through a squad of automated defense drones, using the stolen pulse rifle to blast them out of the air. He scrambled over the wreckage of a collapsed walkway, the void of space visible through a tear in the hull. Below him, the earth spun, beautiful and oblivious. He reached the central core, a vast spherical chamber that housed the heart of the lattice. It was terrifying. The machine was not Imperial tech. It was something older. A swirling construct of liquid metal and dark energy that pulsed with a heartbeat like a dying star. It was suspended in the center of the room, drawing power from the station's reactor. Aiden ran to the control console on the gantries. His fingers flew over the interface. Come on, he muttered. Come on. The screen flashed red. Access denied. Biometric mismatch. He tried to override it with the codes Lyrus had given him. Error. Manual override engaged. Lattice activation in 3 minutes. He pounded the console in frustration. The manual override was locked from the Grand Hall. The system was in a feedback loop. It couldn't be shut down by code. It had to be shut down by will. He stared at the swirling core. The energy was building, a crescendo of psychic static that made his teeth ache. He realized with a sickening lurch what he had to do. The machine required a neural interface. It needed a mind to guide it. He tapped his comms bead. Lyrus! He shouted over the roar of the machine. Static crackled in his ear, then her voice, strained and breathless. Aiden? I am a little busy. I am at the core. The hard shutdown failed. It is cycling up. Then destroy it. I can't. It is shielded. Aiden watched the energy levels spike. Lyris, listen to me. The only way to stop it is to interface with it. I have to trick it into thinking the activation is complete, then reverse the flow. Do not do it, Lyris screamed. It will burn your mind out. You are human. Your neural pathways can't handle the load. I know, Aiden yelled back. That is why I need you. Silence on the line. What do you mean? She asked, her voice quiet amidst the noise of battle. I need your biocode, Aiden said. I need you to anchor me. We have to bridge. A neural bridge? Lyris sounded horrified. Aiden, that is forbidden. It is irreversible. We would be exposed, everything inside us. I don't care, Aiden shouted. I don't care if you see my nightmares. I don't care if you see my fear. I am not letting this thing take my home. He heard the sound of an explosion on her end. Then, the sound of her heavy breathing. Initiate the link, she commanded. Aiden didn't hesitate. He jammed the neural jack into the port at the base of his skull, the same port his captors had used to torture him for months. He screamed as the connection hit him. It wasn't pain. It was everything else. The world dissolved, the metal of the station, the smell of ozone, the roar of the reactor, it all vanished. He was floating in a sea of violet light, and she was there. It wasn't Lyris as he saw her with his eyes. It was Lyris as she felt herself to be. He felt the cold, crushing weight of the crown she had worn since childhood. He felt the loneliness of a palace made of glass where no one was allowed to touch her. He felt her terror when she first saw Earth on the view screen, not fear of the enemy, but fear of her own guilt. And then, he felt how she saw him. He felt a wave of warmth that staggered him. To her, he wasn't a prisoner or a soldier. He was a spark. He was the chaotic, messy, beautiful life she had been denied. He felt her desire for him, not just physical, though that burned hot and bright, but a desperate need for his laughter, his grit, his hand in hers. Aiden. Her voice echoed in his mind, not spoken but felt. I am here, he answered. She felt him too. She felt the beaches of his childhood. She felt the grief for his sister. She felt the anger he carried, and beneath it, the softness he tried to hide. She felt his awe of her, the way he had looked at her in the motel room as if she were the only star in the sky. There were no secrets here, no lies, no princess and prisoner. Just two souls, stripped bare, clinging to each other in the void, grabbed the energy Aiden thought sent, together, in the physical world, in the grand hall. Lyris fell to her knees, her eyes rolling back, glowing with white light, in the core room. Aiden arched his back, his body seizing as the power flowed through him. They reached out with their combined will. They grabbed the dark, swirling storm of the lattice weapon. Turn it, Lyris commanded. Push it back, Aiden urged. They wrestled with the ancient machine and it fought them. It tried to tear them apart, to find the cracks in their connection. But there were no cracks. The bond they had forged in danger, cemented in vulnerability, and sealed in this psychic fusion was stronger than the programming of a dead empire. They didn't just stop the weapon. They broke it. They took the kinetic energy building in the crust of the earth and redirected it. They pushed it up, out, and away, on the surface of the earth. People looked up. The sky, which had been gray with the threat of war, suddenly ignited. A wave of iridescent light, green, violet, and gold, swept across the atmosphere. It wasn't destruction. It was an aurora that spanned the globe, a curtain of light that danced and shimmered, harmlessly dissipating the energy that was meant to enslave them. It was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever seen. On the station, the feedback loop shattered the core. The machine groaned and collapsed inward, its dark light fading. Aiden was thrown backward, the neural jack ripping free. He hit the floor hard, darkness claiming him before he landed, in the grand hall. Lyris collapsed forward, her forehead hitting the cool floor. The fighting had stopped. Everyone, rebel, imperial, soldier, was staring at the screens, watching the lights dance over the planet below. "The weapon is gone," someone whispered. The aftermath was a blur of triage and tribunals. The conspiracy fell apart within hours. With the evidence broadcast to every screen in the system, Kalen's authority evaporated. His own junior officers arrested him in the zero-gravity ruins of the Grand Hall. General Vance tried to flee to a lunar shuttle but was intercepted by his own men. The war didn't end with a treaty. It ended with a collective exhale. Lyris spent 3 weeks in a medical stasis pod, her neural pathways regenerating from the strain of the bridge. When she woke, the world had changed. She faced a military tribunal on the flagship. It was a formality, mostly. The public support for her was overwhelming. The broadcast of her sacrifice and the image of her falling to her knees to save the enemy planet had turned her into an icon. She was stripped of her military command, but she retained her title. She was no longer a conqueror. She was an ambassador. Aiden fared differently. To the hardliners in the Global Defense Coalition, he was a traitor who had collaborated with the enemy. To the resistance, he was a hero. He spent months in debriefings, his name dragged through the mud and then polished again until no one knew quite what to make of him. He didn't care. He only asked one question, every single day. Where is she? 6 months later, the hillside overlooked the city of San Francisco. The rebuilding efforts were visible in the distance, cranes moving against the skyline, repairing the damage from the riots and the panic. But here, in the tall grass, it was quiet. The wind smelled of salt and eucalyptus. Lyris sat on a weathered bench, wearing simple civilian clothes, a heavy coat and jeans. She looked human, save for the faint rhythmic glow of the filaments in her hair and the violet of her eyes. She heard footsteps on the gravel path. She didn't turn. She knew the rhythm of that walk. She felt it in the ghost echo of the neural link that still hummed in the back of her mind. "You are late," she said. Aiden stopped beside the bench. He looked tired. There were gray streaks in his hair that hadn't been there before, and a thin scar ran through his eyebrow. But his smile was the same, crooked and devastating. "Traffic," he said. "It is a nightmare. The flying cars haven't been approved yet." He sat down next to her. He didn't ask if he could, he just belonged there. Lyris looked at him. The sheer relief of seeing him, solid and alive, made her throat tight. "Did they treat you well?" she asked. "Well enough." Aiden shrugged. "They gave me a medal. Then they told me to please stop hacking their servers." It was a mixed message. Lyris smiled, a small, genuine thing. "I missed you," she said. Aiden turned to her. The banter vanished. "I felt you," he said quietly, in the silence. "Sometimes I wake up and I don't know which memories are mine and which are yours. I remember walking through the crystal gardens on your home world. I have never been there." Lyris nodded. "I remember the smell of your mother's kitchen. I remember being afraid of the thunder." She looked down at her hands. "Is it strange?" she asked. "To have a piece of an alien inside your head?" "No," Aiden said. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, grounding. "It feels like the only thing that makes sense." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun begin to set over the Pacific. The sky turned a bruised purple, reminding them both of the bruised colors of her fleet. I can't go back, Lyra said softly. Not really. The council wants me to be a figurehead, a symbol of the new peace. But I don't know if I can live in that palace anymore. It feels cold. Then don't, Aiden said. Where would I go? She asked. I am a woman with no planet. To my people, I am too human. To your people, I am the invader who grew a conscience. Aiden squeezed her hand. You asked me once what home meant, he said. Lyris looked at him. I thought it was a place, she said. I thought it was coordinates, and I thought it was just the dirt I was born on, Aiden said. But we broke that, Lyris. We broke the walls. He gestured to the city below, then up to the sky where the faint lights of the Imperial transport ships could be seen ferrying supplies to the surface, not bombs, but medical tech and energy cells. Home isn't a place, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It isn't a species. It is the people you choose to protect. It is the person who knows your worst secrets and still holds your hand. He turned to face her fully. You are my home, Lyris. Wherever you stand, that is where I belong. Lyris felt the tears prick her eyes. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. It was a gesture of profound intimacy, an echo of the mind link that had saved them. And you are mine, she whispered. They stood up as the stars began to bleed through the twilight. They didn't know what the next day would bring. There would be politics, and anger, and the slow, painful work of healing two civilizations that had tried to kill each other. But as they walked down the hillside, fingers intertwined. Lyris didn't look at the stars with longing anymore. She didn't need to. She had found the center of her universe right here, walking beside her in a worn leather jacket. Above them, the ships moved peacefully in the dark, silent guardians of a new, fragile era. And on the ground, a princess and a soldier walked toward the city lights, ready to build something that would last longer than any empire.